here. I've had several kids do what you're doing now, so I have experience as a worker, but also as a parent. I know what you guys are doing, so it's really a lot of fun. And I work for an NGO called HOPE Foundation. We've been in India for about 25 years, and I've lived in India for about 25 years. I've been here since the beginning. And I'm French, so sorry for my accent, okay? I officially am in charge of our education programs, but I end up doing a lot of other things, as a lot of people do in the NGO world. And I've written my email, so it's not actually underlined, it's just the way the Word document left out, but it's Nadine_Templar@hopeww.org. I'm giving you this because I've been asked to speak on like 5 different topics this morning, so I'll be very quick. And you may not get all the information you need, but I'll be very happy to answer emails, and that's my phone number. In previous years when I've done this, the kids have asked to meet me sometimes afterwards or at the cafeteria or whatever, and I'm happy to do that as well. I really want to help you. So that's my information. Okay, so let's go to the next slide.
Guys,
I'll do
yeah.
that. If somebody can, yeah.
Sorry. Just
go to the next one. We'll talk about, okay, girls, okay. So, isn't she cute? Her name is Sonali. She was, her mother lived in Bihar, which is probably the poorest state in India, and the state would have a large number of girls killed at birth. And so her mother, I don't know about her mother exactly because I've never met her, but I think she was a young single woman, probably worked as a maid, and when she was pregnant, this was 20 years ago, she had the intention of killing the baby at birth. And that's very, very common. And some orphanage workers somehow knew the mother and told them, don't do that. We'll take the baby, we'll help you deliver in the hospital, and we'll take the baby and give the baby for adoption. So this little girl, Sonali, was saved from being killed, but that is a very, very common problem. And I know a lot of you are working on that topic. I just wanted to start with a story. Let's go to the next slide. That's Sonali now. She graduated from AES last May. So the stories don't always end badly, and she's my daughter because I adopted her as a baby. So she's one of my many kids who have graduated from AES. So she escaped death, but a lot of girls don't, and I'll give you some stats in a minute. Okay, next slide. This little girl was left to die in a New Delhi park, and one of my friends called me on New Year's Day 2 years ago and said, what should I do? I found this little baby in the park, a newborn baby, and there's a pack of dogs surrounding her. They're going to kill her. What should I do? So we took the baby to our orphanage. We run an orphanage here in Delhi. And she has now been adopted by an Indian family. But this was another little girl. Just because she was a girl, was going to be dead. So these are just a couple of stories. Just to, this is the reality of the numbers that you read about in books. This is what actually happens. Okay, so next one. Okay, gender imbalance. A lot of you are working on this. On average in India, there are about 9 girls for every 10 boys. Sometimes even less than that, 8 girls, or even less. In some parts of North India, for example, in the richest state of Punjab, in the richest part of New Delhi, South Delhi, where most of you live, the gender imbalance is even worse. And so you shouldn't think that the gender imbalance is linked to poverty. It's not. Actually, the people who get rid of their baby girls the most are the richest people because they have the means to do it. They know how to go to a doctor, get an ultrasound, even though it's illegal. It's now illegal to determine the sex of the baby while the mother is pregnant in India, but people still do it because you can get anything done here as long as you're willing to pay. And a lot of people get rid of their babies while they're still pregnant because they're pregnant with a girl. And so you end up with this imbalance. And in some parts of North India, in Haryana, for example, there are villages where now they don't have girls. It's all boys. And so there's a great concern about the future, what will happen, because these boys will have nobody to marry. So in some places now, what happens is the young men's families actually go to a totally different state to go and find a bride for their sons because there are no girls. So, and the rate is very bad in South Delhi, for example. It's around 8 girls for every 10 boys, you know, which is shocking because I used to think it's because people are poor. They can't afford to pay dowry for their girls, and so, but it's way more complicated than that. So we can talk about that in the discussion afterwards if you want. So feticide, this is an estimate. It's really hard to know the exact stats because nobody will actually tell the truth. I mean, it's not like people are going to say, oh yes, you know, I aborted my baby because she was a girl. I mean, no one's going to actually come forward and say that. But the estimate is that at least there were 8 million girls aborted in the last 10 years. It's probably higher than that, but you know, it's hard to know. And infanticide, so you guys know this probably, a feticide is when you kill the baby while still in the womb, and then infanticide is after the baby's born. So they find out the baby's a girl. It's rare that a boy gets killed. It's very rare. It's usually girls, and they kill the baby girls, and by either actively killing them, like murdering them, by giving them poison, or smothering them, or drowning them, sometimes burying them alive. Another way to kill the baby girls, an infanticide is killing a child before the age of 1. So what sometimes families will do, they'll just stop feeding the child completely and just let her starve to death. So, or they don't provide medical care for the girls. They do for the boys, but not for the girls. And so that's another reason. Okay, so that's gender imbalance, infanticide. Okay, sorry, I don't have time to cover the topics very thoroughly because I was asked to speak on several things. So child labor, but we can discuss afterwards. There's an estimated, again, there are no real stats because again, you know, it's hard to really find out, but roughly 60 million children under the age of 14 work in India. 20 million of those work as domestic workers. So domestic workers would be maids, people working in people's houses, or you see the boys working in restaurants sometimes. If you go to a roadside restaurant on your way somewhere, you may have stopped at the roadside restaurant and you see a child who looks like he's about 8 years old cleaning the tables. Okay, so that's included in the 20 million as well. Officially, children are supposed to be in school. There's a law in India that says that every child under the age of 14 has to be in school. And unlike the Western world, say in America, where it's the parents' responsibility to make sure the kids go to school, in India, officially, it's the government's responsibility to make sure the children are in school before the age of 14. Of course, you know, it doesn't happen. But there is a law, and the government intends for that to happen and are working towards it. Another issue we can talk about maybe in the discussion is bonded labor. That's when parents actually sell their child to somebody, so they get a little bit of money, sometimes as low as 2,000 rupees. They sell their child, and the child then is bonded to the person that they work for, and you know, they're basically a slave. In 1987, the Indian government formulated a policy, the National Policy on Child Labor. And when you hear of child labor, for us Westerners and foreigners, we're like, oh my gosh, this is terrible, it's got to stop. And obviously, you know, it's not good for children to work. But the reality of poverty means that if a child is able to work, they may not starve. And so it's very difficult then to say, well, stop child labor completely overnight, because then you will end up with a lot of other problems. And so what the government has designed is a policy which is taking things step by step, where they don't suddenly abolish child labor overnight, but they do it in steps. And you can look it up on the internet, or I can talk to you more about it. But it's not an overnight thing. And ideally, what these children should do is get into education, and once they're educated, obviously, then there's no need for child labor. Okay, so that's child labor. Next slide. Okay, girls' education. So I do a lot of that. That's kind of my thing. That's our Hope School in South Delhi. Look at these cute little girls. These girls come from very, very poor families. So girls from that kind of background often do not go to school. Their parents are migrant workers. They're people who come from outside of Delhi. and you were there probably at the presentation I did a few weeks ago to the big group where these families come into Delhi, they live in slums, and on average, the whole family has an income of about 3,000 rupees a month. So think about that. You know, how do you spend 3,000 rupees? That's what the family earns in a month to cover everything. The rent is probably half of that. And then they're left with 1,500 rupees to eat, travel, pay for books, you know, and clothes. So you can imagine that sending girls to school is right at the bottom of their priorities list. And if they're going to send a child to school, they're more likely to send a boy. The way that, you know, people think in India is, and don't get me wrong, I mean, I love this country and I've lived here a long time, but, you know, they definitely still to this day value boys more than girls. And not just poor people. It's very, very common. When I give birth to my children, I have 4 girls and 1 boy. 2 of my girls are adopted, but I did give birth to 2 other girls, and every time my girls were born, people would commiserate and say, we're so sorry. I was like, what are you sorry about? Well, you know, I didn't have a boy. And then when I had my son, you know, it was like, woo, you know. The eunuchs were at my door in the next 5 minutes, you know. Everyone was celebrating. So, but girls' education, I really believe that girls' education will be the way that India will come out of poverty. Because if you educate the girls, a lot of incredible things happen. They learn how to read and write, so they can learn about hygiene, about health. Infant mortality goes down, maternal mortality goes down. A lot of things just come into place when the mother, when the girls and the mothers then are educated. So we try to really push for girls' education. In our HOPE schools, we have half girls, half boys. It's a policy that we take as many girls as we take boys. And, you know, the girls do very, very well because they're very driven. They're very motivated to do well in school. So, next slide. A few stats. Okay, so education is a fundamental right in India by law for both girls and boys under the age of 14. However, to this day, more than half the women in India are illiterate. Almost half the girls under 14 in India do not go to school. And that's mostly in the rural areas of North India. If you go to South India, a lot more girls go to school, and they go to school longer. And there's a cultural, historical reason for that. But in India, even if girls go to school, usually by your age, they stop going to school. Like around 8th grade, that's the time when girls stop going to school because the parents are basically getting them ready for marriage. So if you were an Indian girl in a traditional Indian family and you lived in a village in Uttar Pradesh, probably your parents would pull you out of school right now, even though you've been going to school, and they would look for a groom for you and prepare you for marriage. So how would you like that? So benefits of female education, as I said earlier, better health, better hygiene. The marriage age goes up. Girls don't get married as teenagers once they're educated. They tend to want to do something with their life. You remember the story of the girl I told you about, the girl who lost her eye, how her main concern was to whether she was going to get married or not, but now that she can read and write and she's in school, she's not talking about that anymore. She wants to get a job. So education is definitely the key. So next slide. Okay, vocational training. Sorry, so many different topics today, but vocational training, so that's after school, okay? So what happens to these young people who do go to school? Then they have to get a job. A lot of the workforce in India, about 90%, is not regulated. I mean, these people have jobs where they don't get health insurance, they're not really registered, they have no paperwork, you know. And so in order for people to actually get a proper job, a proper career, they need training. And so a lot of what we do at Hope Foundation now and other NGOs is we give vocational training. So what does that mean? Is between the ages of 16 to 25 usually, we train people for jobs, actual jobs. The Indian economy right now is booming. It's very, very exciting. There's a lot going on India is changing, there's a lot of progress. We want these young people from poor families, from underprivileged backgrounds to actually benefit from that, but they need to have the skills. And so we do a lot of computer training, a lot of computer courses. Next slide, not just for girls, boys as well. Okay, next slide. And spoken English. If you speak English in India, it will increase your income dramatically. Life skills. When you teach somebody, train somebody for a job, you need to train them more than just with how to use a computer, because these are kids who come from slums usually, so they may not know how to dress for a job interview, they may not know how to talk to somebody from a different caste, they may not know how to, even simple things like hygiene, presentation, manners, how to open a bank account. I mean, things that, very basic things that you would learn normally in your family, but because their parents are illiterate, they don't learn that at home. So we train them in all those things. We do courses in tailoring for young women. How most clothes here in India are still made by hand, and so that's a good job for a girl, and that's a job that she can do and be at home and raise a family at home, which in the Indian context is actually still valued. Beauty culture, all the beauty parlors in India. So a lot of girls study that, and that's also a good job. Masonry for women, yeah. When we had the tsunami in South India in 2004, a lot of communities were razed to the ground, and they had to be rebuilt. And what you notice in a lot of situations is that the women are the ones who end up coming forward wanting to rebuild. And so women are very tough in India. They've had a hard life, and they're very, very tough. And so they come forward wanting to rebuild their communities. So we decided to train the women in a skill that was traditionally a man's job, mason. And the women have done incredibly well. They're now running the businesses and employing men. So for these women, talking about women's empowerment, that's an incredible achievement. So we do courses in masonry, retail, all these malls that you see with all the big shops now. So there are a lot of jobs for young people. So we train them in retail, which means we train them in how to handle customers and how to speak English and how to be presentable and polite and all these things. So we train them with a little bit of financial literacy as well. So we train them in retail jobs, and there are a lot of jobs in India right now with all the multinational chains coming in, Pizza Hut, Coffee Day, Starbucks is coming now, they're going to give a lot of jobs. So we run these courses, and they're about 3 to 6 months courses, and both for boys and girls. And once they do this course, say somebody has a job and they don't speak English very well, they don't know computers, they may make 5,000-6,000 rupees a month if they're lucky in a city. They do a course for 3 to 6 months. They learn how to do basic computer things. I mean, stuff you've known since you were 6 years old probably, like Word and how to use internet, how to do emails, and so they do a basic computer course. They learn to speak conversation English. They learn to present themselves, and boom, 6 months later, they have at least doubled their income, if not tripled. They get jobs at 10,000-12,000 rupees a month after doing a course. So for them, obviously, it's a great opportunity. So that's vocational training. So I think that's the end. Yeah. So sorry, I had to cover lots of different topics in a short time. But, you can find everything on the internet now, and I'm also happy to answer more questions if I can answer them. I'm not sure that I will know the answers to everything you want to know, but we can have some discussion now.